To all my lovely friends, all you little friends out there, this is a big hello from Happy Lobo. And Happy Lobo brings a new story with a lot of happiness. Today's story is Lotus and Feather. It was written by Jiang. And this story is about Lotus and Feather. Are you thinking about lotus, the flower? No, I'm not talking about that lotus. I'm talking about this little pretty girl, Lotus. That's her name. And Lotus stayed in a small village and she stayed with her grandfather. Her grandfather was a craftsman and he used to make lovely baskets. One day, Lotus was coming back from school, but she was looking very sad and she was looking down because no one played with Lotus. Lotus was unwell for a few days. She was sick, and because of that she had a bad throat, a sore throat. Sometimes when we fall ill, we also have a bad throat and our voice sounds different. The same problem was with Lotus, and everybody in school just kept her far away. They didn't play with her at all. Lotus was very sad because her friends didn't invite her for lunch, they didn't play with her, and so because of that, Lotus came back home very, very sad. As she walked inside her house, her grandfather saw Lotus and he realized something is wrong with Lotus. She is very dull today. So let me cheer her up. So he said, Lotus, can we go for boating to the lake? And this excited Lotus. She always loved going boating with Grandpa. And soon they were in the lake on the boat. Grandpa told Lotus about a sad story about the lake. Grandpa said, look at this lake, Lotus. Once upon a time it was a beautiful place, but now it's in a mess. Then there were so many birds coming here. There was a lot of fish in the water. There were beautiful plants around. But these men who have come here and attacked this place, the fishermen, they have robbed all the fish. The hunters have killed all the birds. And this entire place, once such a beautiful place it was, it's in such a mess. I feel really sad looking at this place. And when Lotus heard this, Lotus also felt sad. Then Lotus went to the bank and she picked a small reed and she made a nice flute out of it. And she started blowing the flute. Have you seen a flute? I have one flute with me. It's a bamboo flute. See, it's got these holes and you can play it. I'm trying to play, but I need a lot of practice. But Lotus was good with playing her whistle, the reed. And she played one tune there. It was not a very happy tune because Lotus was sad. After coming home, she helped Grandpa make lovely baskets. The next morning, Lotus went to the lake again. And this time she had gone there to collect some reed for her grandfather. And as she was busy collecting the reed, she saw a beautiful bird. A big bird, a blue bird. The blue bird had long legs and of course a tall neck and a beautiful beak. As Lotus was admiring this beautiful bird, bang came a sound. It was a gunshot. Yes, there was a hunter who was pointing his gun at the bird. Lotus got very scared. She just sat down there and crouched and was waiting to know what was happening around. She was really scared. But suddenly she got an idea. I can scare that hunter. So she took her drum and took a stick and started hitting the drum loudly. It sounded like thunder. When the hunter heard this strange noise, he too got scared and he ran away. He ran away so fast that he didn't even look back. And there was silence there. This was the time Lotus woke up and slowly looked at the bird. The bird had fallen down. The bird was shot. Yes, the bird was lying there. Lotus slowly walked towards the bird and tried to touch it. But the bird went back 2 steps. But then it could not stand any longer and it fell down on the ground. This was the time Lotus realized, I need to do something urgently. And slowly Lotus picked that heavy bird and took her home. Back there, Grandpa saw the bird. And Grandpa said, quickly, we need to help this bird. And so he brought his medicine box and started attending to the bird. Grandpa, in fact, had rescued many birds. Some of the sick birds, some were injured. So he knew what to do. So he cleaned the wounds and he put a bandage. But then the bird was very weak and it was just lying on the ground. When Lotus saw the bird, Lotus was very, very, very sad. It was such a beautiful bird and he was lying there helpless. In fact, he had just closed his eyes and he was not even moving. Lotus thought, is the bird dead? Grandpa said, no, he has lost a lot of blood and he needs a lot of care and food. So the entire evening Lotus sat next to the bird and later she even played the reed. I hope the bird is listening, she said. That night Lotus went very close to the bird and slept just next to it. And Lotus was fast asleep. The next morning something woke up Lotus and then she realized, what is moving around me? It was the bird. He had woken up. He had opened his eyes, which means the bird was alive. And Lotus was so happy, she was overjoyed. She ran to Grandpa and said, Grandpa, Grandpa, look, the bird is alive. And when Grandpa came, he was also very happy. He told Lotus, Lotus, we have to take care of this bird. The bird needs a lot of good food and you have to clean the wound every day. Lotus said, I will do that, Grandpa. Don't worry, I will take care of the bird. Every day, Lotus would clean the wounds and go to the lake to bring some food. And so as days passed by, Lotus and the bird became close friends. And do you know what did Lotus call the bird? She called it Feather. Isn't that a nice name? Feather. So Lotus and Feather became close friends. They would sit next to each other. They would play with each other. Lotus would feed the bird. And then they would also sleep together, hugging close to each other. And that's why they became very close friends, Lotus and Feather. Slowly, the bird started recovering. And it stood up one day. That was a beautiful moment because Lotus and Grandfather were very happy to see that the bird was recovering. But still it couldn't fly because it had injured its wings. You see the bandage here? Yes, the bird was injured and it needed a lot of care. In all of this, Lotus forgot to go to school. She spent all her time playing with Feather, her new friend. But Grandpa was not happy and Grandpa told Lotus to go to school. Lotus was not very happy with this idea. But then, as if Feather knew that Lotus had to go to school, Feather started pushing Lotus out. Said, go to school. It was such a cute thing. But then Lotus very reluctantly went to school. Feather followed Lotus every day to school. And when Lotus was in the school, Feather would wait outside. One night, when everybody was fast asleep, Feather made a very strange noise. Feather started giving an emergency call, a different sound. And Grandpa and Lotus woke up. And soon they realized that there was water outside. Grandpa opened the door and realized that there is a flood. He realized that there was an earthquake nearby and the dam next to their house had broken and water was rushing into the village. It was time to alert the entire village and soon Grandpa, Lotus and Feather got onto a boat and they went to every house. Grandpa was shouting loudly, wake up, wake up. And our friend Lotus was banging the drum so that everybody is awake. And our friend Feather was also making a loud sound just to wake everybody up. And that night, they saved 300 villagers. And this became a big news. And Feather became a hero that night. The next day, Feather's news came in so many newspapers and Feather became very popular. Many people came home to see this beautiful bird, and Grandpa told them about the injury, the hunter, and how Feather had recovered. He also told the villagers about the hunters and all the destruction they did to the lake. He asked them to join together and save the lake. Very soon, Feather became very famous. Lotus also was famous, and everybody spoke about Feather and Lotus. It was March, and that's the time when birds come into the village. And there were a lot of birds that came, and they were migrating towards north. And this is when Grandpa realized that it's time for Feather to go. And that evening they took Feather out to the lake, and Grandpa hugged Feather and said goodbye and let him in the air. But Feather flew a little bit and then came back. Grandpa realized that Feather will not go until Lotus says bye. So he handed Feather to Lotus. It was very difficult for Lotus. Lotus just hugged Feather and he didn't want to let him go. But then, as Grandpa had said, that Feather had to go to his family. So, finally Lotus cried and said goodbye and let him out. This time, Feather flew up, soared into the sky, took a couple of rounds and then disappeared. Lotus was very sad. Deep within, she thought that Feather will reach his family and they'll be happy. Every day, Lotus visited the lake and played the reed, hoping that somewhere far away, Feather will listen to the sound and be very happy. It was March, and that's the time when birds come into the village. And there were a lot of birds that came, and they were migrating towards north. And this is when Grandpa realized that it's time for Feather to go. And that evening they took Feather out to the lake, and Grandpa hugged Feather and said goodbye and let him in the air. But Feather flew a little bit and then came back. Grandpa realized that Feather will not go until Lotus says bye. So he handed Feather to Lotus. It was very difficult for Lotus. Lotus just hugged Feather and he didn't want to let him go. But then, as Grandpa had said, that Feather had to go to his family. So, finally Lotus cried and said goodbye and let him out. This time, Feather flew up, soared into the sky, took a couple of rounds and then disappeared. Lotus was very sad. Deep within, she thought that Feather will reach his family and they'll be happy. Every day, Lotus visited the lake and played the reed, hoping that somewhere far away, Feather will listen to the sound and be very happy. Several months had passed, and one morning, there was a sound at the door. There was a strange croak. Lotus ran and opened the door. To her surprise, it was Feather. Feather, and there was somebody else. Next to Feather, there was a pretty female bird. Yes, Feather's wife. And next, there was a small tiny chick. Yes, that was Feather's family. They had come back as if to say thank you. It was such a beautiful moment when Lotus met Feather's family. And Lotus went out and stroked Feather. And this was the time when Lotus was in for a bigger surprise. As soon as she looked up, she saw hundreds of birds flying in. She quickly called Grandpa and they rushed to the lake. And what they saw at the lake was astonishing. It was a miracle. The lake was alive again. There were hundreds of birds. Feather had brought his entire family to the lake. And there was so much of happiness there. There were birds who were dancing, who were flying, who were making different sounds. And everybody was happy. The villagers were happy. Grandpa was very happy. And this is when Lotus also joined them and played the reed. And there was a beautiful, happy environment there. That brings us to the end of this story. This story is special because it teaches a very good lesson. It tells us to be helpful. To be helpful and not to expect anything in return. But you never know. Sometimes when you help somebody, you may get many things in return. In this case, Lotus helped Feather. And Feather, what did Feather give in return? Can you think? Feather saved the village from the flood. Yes. And Feather also brought life into the lake by bringing its entire family there. Isn't that beautiful? So let's promise to be helpful children. Let's help everyone. Let's help our parents. Let's help people in our community. Let's help animals too. And that way we can be beautiful, good children. And I'm sure you'll be blessed for this. So this brings us to the end of my story. I hope you liked the story. Drop in a message, drop a comment if you like it. Say something nice about the story. And also share it with others. Don't forget to see my other stories. You can listen to my other stories on my YouTube and my Facebook channel. That's Happy Lobo. Go there and listen to my stories. So, this is Happy Lobo signing off and telling bye-bye and telling be helpful, but with a smiling face. Ta-da, bye-bye.